today we have very interesting conversation with someone who is doing outreach and work to prevent human trafficking down in San Diego. His name is Youssef. Hi, Youssef.
Hi.
And we're just going to do a little interview today, and if you can share with us what work you're doing down in San Diego.
Okay. So I'm Youssef Miller, the founder of Mosque Against Trafficking, and the organization was started in 2016 in an effort to make sure that the vulnerable populations of the Muslim community had routes towards freedom if they've been affected by human trafficking, whether sex, labor, or organ trafficking. So as that as that program started to develop, we mostly started with families and educating families within the mosque, and we reached out to other mosques, and then we included a network of mosques giving this education. I thought it would be harder than it was to get mosques to chime in and feel comfortable about the subject, giving its sexual nature in some cases, but they were all about it. It really spread like wildfire with the interest in the Muslim men and women. So from there, we started to, and I should say on the outset, the way we even got started is that I visited Churches Against Trafficking, which is I consider my big sister. Churches Against Trafficking, I had no idea what trafficking, human trafficking meant, so I went to listen to this talk, and they had survivors there, they had law enforcement, and I was just blown away. And I made sure that I put my effort into it to make a difference in human trafficking. It moved my heart and soul that much. So I started right away. Actually, the next day, I founded Mosque Against Trafficking and started educating the Muslim community. And I found out early on that you need collaboration. I was already interested in collaboration with other social justice activities, so I hit the ground running with collaboration. I started talking and doing presentations at other mosques and churches, synagogues, high schools, colleges, and it just went really, to use a common term now, viral, so to speak. It just went really fast throughout the community. So, I spent time spreading awareness as much as I could. And I started getting my family involved, and my daughter, my two sons, they go with me on these educational outreaches. So my kids, my daughter now is 20, my sons are now 13 and 12, and they've been doing this work for 2 years. And the value that I wanted to add to that is that having children speak to other children is so critical. They listen to older people like us, and they hear more older people telling us what to do, what to watch out for. But when it comes from a child and speaking their vernacular, and they understand what they mean, and they communicate in ways that they are used to, they tend to give a larger ear. During one of my collaborations, I collaborated with our indigenous community. We were invited to give a talk at the at Sequan, and they had all these indigenous families come to learn about human trafficking and missing and murdered indigenous peoples. So we were given a talk there, and this is the first time I gave a talk without my children, and they only had was the first time my children spoke without me present. I mean, without me speaking. So they gave this beautiful presentation to everyone, parents and students, and all types of people. But what is important is that at the end, they kicked all the parents, the adults, out except for one moderator, and had children speak to children. And this was so powerful. All the questions that children had in reserve about human trafficking, about the exploitation, how they get trapped into it, all of those came out when the adults were out of the room, and they were speaking only to their peers. So we need to capitalize on that great idea from our indigenous brothers and sisters. There was an adult in the room, the moderator, so that everything stayed on the up and up, on the above board, and everything was appropriate, and we got the data that could help us with parents and activists. So I've been using this platform and this media to advance that type of idea, having youth involvement. This is a critical component which I don't think is used often enough. And I understand why parents, they're sensitive about their children talking about such a heavy subject, and I understand that completely. But these are my children. I'm their parent, and I'm in charge of their well-being. And I believe if they're old enough to be victimized by a thing, they're old enough to learn about that thing. So I walk that way and I talk that way. So my children have, even at 10 and 11, when they were younger, they were discussing at colleges and universities and in churches and mosques on the dangers that affect their age group. So they were talking about the internet, the predators. They're talking about how they befriend them and give them all these love texts and these icons where they don't realize that it's actually an adult on the other end. And the children are really receptive because they mention the apps that kids are on. I don't know what apps kids are on. They just start mentioning them. They mention the GPS systems that are built in. They mention the phone numbers that are attached with virtual gaming, and the kids really tune their ears into the other kids discussing it on a level. When we say force, fraud, or coercion in human trafficking, kids don't know what coercion means. Kids don't know what, they don't know those words. My kids don't use those words, but they get the same message across. So I hope to spread that tactic that I learned from our indigenous brothers and sisters, and that we use in the mosque to have children speak to children. During this work, I was offered a position at the San Diego Regional Anti-Human Trafficking Advisory Council, which I sit there on the board now, and I'm with the community subcommittee. So I do outreach through the community, and some of the projects that we do, we go to Comic-Con that happens every year here. People don't realize that during sporting events and holiday trips that people take, some people engage in holiday sex. So they want to buy sex on the dark web and going through pimps or whatever it is, it spikes during those periods. So whether it's football, baseball, soccer, and even Comic-Con. And as you can imagine, Comic-Con, people are walking around in masks all day down in San Diego. So it's real fertile ground for them to exploit other people and to ask for routes to exploit people and being anonymous at the same time. So we go down to the convention center and we post up booths and we send people out with anti-human trafficking pamphlets and awareness talks, and we walk through the crowds and we just hand out pamphlets to spread the awareness during that time period. And a lot of times, and we dress up as characters so we can make it fun too. As we engage, we bring our families and we make sure that we enjoy the work that we're doing. And so we're down there dressed up as characters. Some of us, you don't have to dress up, but we go down there and we spend the whole weekend in shifts down there explaining what is human trafficking, what it's like in this area, and to be careful for all the people who are visiting this area. And hopefully they can take it home to where they're visiting from and spread the awareness there as well. So that's one of the projects. So also we like I said, visit churches and mosques and things like that. And we try to be innovative when it comes to our indigenous brothers and sisters to make sure that we don't leave any particular ethnic group out. As we probably know, the Asian community is trafficked in a particular way when it comes to massage parlors. We'll find a higher percentage of Asians being exploited during that way. And we need to be appreciative of that and understand that so we can address it. There's no one size fits all in human trafficking. We understand that our indigenous brothers and sisters, they have a different perspective when it comes to reservations and how it happens on reservations. And the African American community, which I'm a part of, we have a different culture and subculture of this type of oppression with the pimpology and all of that kind of thing. And our white brothers and sisters and our Latino brothers and sisters, when it comes to sex trafficking and labor trafficking, people make the mistake for our labor trafficking that it has something to do with the border. And actually, it doesn't. when it comes to sex trafficking. America, we have over 80% of the victims in America are American born and raised, and over 80% of the traffickers are American born and raised. So it's a weaponized statement against our brown brothers and sisters at our southern border. But the only time human trafficking becomes a real issue to the border is when it has to do with labor trafficking. And that is a fact, that a lot of the labor trafficking that comes through the border affects our brothers and sisters of Latino origin. And we need to make sure that we understand that and address that in the kitchens, in the fields, picking produce and things like that. So one of the things that I wanted to target in my co-chair, my other co-chair, we try to make sure that we identify the different communities that are affected and how they're affected, so that we can make sure that we make an impact. We can't just focus on the way it happens to people of white background. You know, that one size doesn't fit all, and all predators aren't from people of color. You know, so we want to break those stigmas to let people know that everybody is affected, no matter what background you come from, no matter what economic status you come from, and no matter what your immigration status is. Everyone is affected by this, and the reason why it exists that way is because we're too busy looking the wrong way when it's happening right under our noses. So this is one of our push for addressing human trafficking. My co-chair, Rebecca Boyce, Dr. Rebecca Boyce, she also got off the ground the male speaker series. So she has males come up and discuss, you know, on a weekly basis on the human trafficking that they experience as males, so that we can get out the word that yes, males are also trafficked, you know, as boys and men as well. Our LGBTQ community, we try to address all of those sub communities within our greater American community, so that no one is left out. Even though we may be, for example, Churches Against Trafficking, myself as Muslims, you know, Mosque Against Trafficking, our Jewish brothers and sisters are standing up a Synagogues Against Trafficking, and we include everybody in this fight. We're not, so to speak, exclusive to people of faith. You can have faith, you can have a different faith, you can be of non-faith. It doesn't matter. Oppression of a human being is oppression of a human being, and that is primary to our fight in human trafficking. So this is the thrust of what we do. We make sure we're inclusive of the different types of communities, the runaway community, the youth community, the shelters, in you know, that nature, how people are exploited through the shelters and the foster care system. That's the word I was looking for. The foster children who are aging out of the system, who are becoming homeless on the street as homeless youth, they are high risk for becoming trafficked in this nation. So we try to look at all of these instances and try to make sure that we address them properly, because we don't want to leave anyone out. And that's the only way we can make a difference. And if we focus on the youth, which is my particular love, is to focus on the youth and make sure they're educated, we can change the culture of female exploitation. Because let's admit it, is, as we already know, it's mostly men doing this, and it's not in our DNA, it's in our culture. So if we can change our culture, we can change the way men see women, that they're not a commodity, they're not something to be used and thrown away, they're human beings, and they deserve all the rights and protections of all other human beings. So as my sons grow up, they're 11 and 12, well, now they're 12 and 13, as they grow up, their appreciation for women changes from the current, you know, American value system. And if we can do that for other 10 and 12 and 11-year-old boys, by the time we get to a generational shift, the impact should be different, that they wouldn't want to engage in oppressing another person for this quote unquote non-victim activity. It is a victimizing activity, and they'll know it from growing up. So we hope to change the cultural shift from these young boys into manhood, so that when they teach their children, by the time it's time for them to teach their children, it's almost a 0%, which we shoot for. I know that's very optimistic for a lot of us, but we have to have lofty goals, because this is a tragic and terrible thing that happens.
Absolutely, yes. And I can't agree with you more. I agree that we need to really focus on preventative work. And like you say, to work with youth and children. And of course, it's very important that we speak their language, like you said, and the
Yes.
content is appropriate for them. And
Yes.
I think it's very important also to get on like social media like this, because our children spend a lot of time on social media, right? And that's
Yes.
where they're getting attention from traffickers. And I'm glad that you're doing this work, and we need to spread the word around and get others involved as well. And also how you mentioned the community, because I think to make a difference, we really have to make sure that community is heavily involved. And like you said, there's different dynamics in each group, and we need to learn those dynamics and how we can better help those people too. But it's people like you and and others that are doing work within the community and bringing the awareness, then we can really make a difference, yeah, for
Thank you.
with trafficking. Yes, yes.
One
Well,
of the innovations that we're thinking about is during this coronavirus crisis, which is
mhm,
affecting the whole world, the schools are trying to implement a stay-at-home online training. And I want to look into if they can like deliver a PSA during that online interaction when they take a break or whatever it is. Or we just have to think about it. It's this new thing is happening and it's very fluid. But if we can keep the momentum of fighting human trafficking going during this stay-at-home period, it
yeah.
would be great. They're at home; they can watch these PSAs while they're in school, well, virtual school, and we can forward that idea of educating the youth.
Absolutely. And we, our focus is also to work with educational system, like you said,
Yes.
and have this preventative work. I did, I would be honest with you. I did have people who were against bringing awareness to school, some parents, because they didn't want their children to be exposed to this kind of information. But I think you brought up very good point, saying, well, traffickers are going to be out there and they're
Yes.
online, and they're trying to lure in our children. And I think it's just a matter of delivering message appropriately for different ages. Of course, you have someone, like you said, 11, 12 years old, right? Or someone who is older. We just have to make sure it's appropriate messages.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And
But
that's the way my children they speak. They don't speak inappropriately because they're also children and they're my children. I'm not going to let them speak
yes.
inappropriately. So they tone it down to that receptive area, and it really goes across really well. And one of the mistakes that our parents, in my opinion, a mistake that our parents make is that when we shelter our kids, the traffickers are not sheltering our kids. Only
Yes.
they are. So they're making them more vulnerable if they don't at least give them an exposure to it which they find appropriate. And not
Mhm.
all of them are. Some of them are right in your face and direct, and I understand, okay, but that's not the only type that's out there. So they can search, and we can make available uh, lessons that are child friendly.
Exactly. And like you said, we still have technology available, and we can just spread the awareness with social media that we have, and,
Yes.
and help do the preventative work. Well,
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing the information and finding time to connect with us during this, uncertain timing and very difficult timing for all of us. But like you
Thank you
said,
for having me.
yes, thank you. But like you said, social media is still there, and we can use this technology to help and move on and help those that are at higher risk and talk about the issues. Now, do you have a Facebook page, or do you have a social media that you started already so people can connect with you?
Yes, we have a Facebook page, Mosque Against Trafficking, and
Okay.
we're the only one out there, Mosque Against Trafficking. So you can find it there. And my daughter she started another social media one. If you just type in Mosque Against Trafficking, our tagline should be in there somewhere. But Mosque Against Trafficking on Facebook is the only one. So you'll be able to see not only what we've been doing, but I try to make sure that I present the slideshows that everyone else is teaching. I don't want them to only learn from me. I want them to learn to other people that I go in and I support their education and their trainings. And I post those trainings on the Facebook so they can read it and be educated just from going to this Facebook page. So if the family or the parents want to go and browse that Facebook page, they'll find slideshows that are appropriate for them. Some are technical, some are child friendly, some are direct in your face. So it's a host of different styles. And we as human trafficking fighters, we should always support one another. So even if I already know this idea, I know what's the warning signs, I go to another presentation just to support them.
Absolutely. And I always say this to everyone too that I'm meeting. We can only make changes if we're going to unite together, everyone,
Yes.
you know, and then we can really focus on providing information and bringing the awareness. Well, you know, this video is going to go on YouTube and our social media platforms, and we're going to add the links for your social media so that way people can go and check out the video. And thank you again.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, Yusuf. Be
Bye.
safe. Okay.
You too.